Hello, and thank you for joining us on today's webinar, Solving Shadow IT Information Security and Governance Strategies. My name is Tommy Strickland, and I'm a marketing manager here at Fair Warning, and I'll be your host today. Before we begin the webinar, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. We are broadcasting this through WebEx, and the audio is optimized to be heard through your computer speakers or a headset. If you are encountering any sound quality or volume issues and need to join the teleconference, the dial-in information can be found in the Info tab at the top left of the screen or by clicking on that phone icon on the right menu bar. We hope to have some time at the conclusion of the presentation for a question and answer session, and I encourage you to submit any questions you have as they come up so they can be placed in the queue for response. To submit a question, simply type them into the Q&A module that appears on the right-hand side of your screen. So our speakers today are Gene Fredriksen, the Chief Information Security Officer for PSCU, and Kurt Long, the founder and CEO of Fair Warning. Gene Fredriksen has over 25 years of IT experience, with the last 20 focused on information security. Mr. Fredriksen held the positions of Global Chief Information Security Officer for Tyco International, Principal Consultant for Security and Risk Management Strategies for Burton Group, Vice President of Technology Risk Management, and Chief Security Officer for Raymond James Financial, headquartered in St. Petersburg, Florida, and Information Security Manager for American Family Insurance. He served as the chair of the Security and Risk Assessment Steering Committee for BITS, as well as serving on the R&D Committee for the Financial Services Sector Steering Committee of the Department of Homeland Security. He's a member of the SC Magazine Editorial Advisory Board and attended the FBI Citizens Academy. Kurt Long is the founder and CEO of Fair Warning, a global leader in application security intelligence solutions for the last 12 years. Kurt holds multiple patents around the world related to information security. He has also been involved in the founding of several information security companies that have become public or acquired. Mr. Long is a recognized thought leader in information security, privacy and compliance, and has been featured in dozens of articles, published multiple papers, and has been called on to provide expert testimony before governments in the U.S. and Europe. So I want to go ahead and just highlight a few of the topics we'll be kind of discussing today. We'll start by going through the definition and the background of shadow IT, talk about different business unit and IT perspectives, establishing policies and communication, discovering and prioritizing risk in your applications, and application security intelligence. With that being said, Gene, I'll pass the ball to you to get us started here.
Thank you. When I looked at this subject, and I've spent a lot of time dealing with it, the thing that strikes me is this is just another thing in the constant march of technology that we've seen. It seems like every few years in my dealing with technology, something new happens. There's a new tool. There's a new service that comes online. The cloud is just one of the latest things, the shadow IT. And essentially what we're dealing with is we've got some technology out there that allows anyone with a credit card and access to the internet to become their own IT department. And as it says, 80% of employees admit to using some type of SaaS app, whether it's cloud technology, e-commerce, anything could be Dropbox, could be any one of a number of different packages, up to and including Facebook and some of the other things where people are using this new cloud-based, this new virtual technology to provide value to their apps. So let's talk for a minute about, if you're IT-centric or you're living in the IT world, what this is doing to IT. Now, we come from a very structured environment typically, so the whole cycle starts by the business saying, you know what, you guys aren't really responding to my needs. Technology is changing, my business needs are changing rapidly, so I'm going to go out and do something on its own. So business then brings the IT decisions and initiatives down into their own hands. So they'll go out, they'll deal with a third-party provider of some kind for collaboration tools, for instance, and they'll build systems out there. so they've done that. That system then actually will start to impact the business. It gets integrated into business. And we're seeing a proliferation of those shadow IT initiatives. It's not just one department, it's 10 departments, each choosing a different tool, a different implementation, a different vendor. And now the next thing they're doing is they're accessing IT and saying, you know what, this tool would really be great if you could just integrate it into some of the back-end data sources. So they don't want to reinvent the data, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it puts an extra load on you. Then the IT resources get taxed by managing all that extra complexity, which leads to, again, them being slow to respond to the business units, into that emerging technology. So it's that, I call it the IT death spiral that we're dealing with. So look, there are two business perspectives, and I'm not really taking sides here because there's value on both. The business unit perspective is, I've got customer demand, I need to get it done as soon as possible. No more time for IT where everything takes 18 months and $1 million. You know, we've got to be agile. Also, any magazine you pick up, decentralization is the norm. Decentralization of technology, decentralization of decision-making, decentralization of tools, and there's also a drive from the business unit side for decreased bureaucracy. If they don't have to wait 6 months to get a project manager to do something, in their mind, they're providing immediate value to the business, and in many cases there are. And if any economics person will say you that as you lean out the organization and flatten the hierarchies, it's much better for the company, both financially and to be responsive. However, on the IT side is good, and it's saying, you know what, I'm really glad you're doing this, but have you thought of disaster recovery? Have you thought of backing this up? What's your plan if that vendor goes away? Who's providing vendor governance? So they're saying, you know what, if you want me to help you with your technology, I need to at least be aware of what you're using. And in most cases, IT is not aware of all the processes that are out there. Also, when things go bad, if you expect IT to help you do the firefighting, again, they need to be included in the process, and they need to help define the security guidelines to prevent the fires from happening in the first place. And last, I mentioned before, if your service needs to be highly available, if this thing that you built, the customer is expected to be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, IT has to help with those initiatives. They have to help, particularly if some of the data comes from the back-end databases. So the base is really policies and communication. It's obvious you can't say no. You can't break fingers when they go out and they're trying to do something to solve a customer need. So you've got to all get on the same page. You've got to look at some of the things that will make successful. The first is establish a policy and implement identity and access protection. However, this isn't an IT-centric activity. You've got to bring the businesses in. You've got to bring the primary providers in. You've got to establish a direction and a strategy for going forward. And while your long-term strategy may be to reduce the overall number of vendors you have in this area, you've got to give people the opportunity to define a migration path that meets their business need. You've also got to look at the resolution strategies. You've got to have a broad-minded CIO. You can't have someone who's very protectionist and is saying, you know, everything has to come through me. The IT staff and the CIO have to be inclusive rather than exclusive, and you should always leverage internal audit. You know, the role of IT is just to increase productivity, to allow the business to support the business. Done right, this can do it. Again, focus on communication. Let the business know the repercussions of bypassing IT, some of the problems, particularly when they want to get to the back-end data. You've got to earn their respect. If they honestly believe that you're being obstructionist and you're too rigid and you never deliver on time, they will continue to go around you. Listen to them, understand what their concerns are, and come back. And develop an assessment strategy. Find out what's out there. You can do it from surveys. You can do it by looking at some of the metrics that you've got. But also, as I said before, internal audit is your partner. When they go out and they audit other departments, have them ask the questions about shadow IT and distributed processing. Find out where those are, and then have them ask the questions about what are your policies to protect this? What are your policies to make sure it's highly available? What are your policies for oversight? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is going to be, well, we haven't done it, we haven't thought of it. IT will then bring the compliance in the IT organization into it for you. Okay. So we talked briefly about discovering. You've got to understand, you've got to get a good inventory of what's out there before you start looking at it. They're not always obvious. They don't always jump out at you. Unfortunately, a lot of the users of some of these apps are your execs. So it's not the easiest discussions to always have. But you have to identify the users using those unapproved apps. There's a lot of things you can do. You can look at your outbound proxy. You can look at your web traffic. You can hire a company to do it. It's solutions. There's a lot of companies out there that will help you discover what's out there and what's being used. Once you have that idea of what's out there and what services are being used, you've got to go back and realize that you need to satisfy now your regulators and your auditors. So now we're going to ask what types of sensitive data are in those cloud apps. And it's not always obvious. They might be buried in screenshots, might be buried in emails, a lot of different methods, but you need to invest the time to find out. The list is there. PII, PHI, financial information, is it PCI data, card data, intellectual property. What are the things that are being put out there where you're not sure that you have good controls? Building this in then, once you identify what data is out there, then you need to really start to talk about what are the controls. Do you have real-time monitoring? What are the external threats? Who's done the risk assessment? And then who's accountable and who has access? If there is an external data source being used or a service being used, someone has to be accountable. Someone has to accept the risk and sign the bottom line. Very few people will want to do that, and that's where they'll look for help. They'll say, well, I have no idea what's going on with the data. I'm not willing to accept the risk. Well, that's a red flag. Again, you involve audit, you involve the executive management, you bring everybody in, and you'll come down to, developing some firm foundations based on normal management practices going forward. So monitoring and control strategies. There's a couple of things here. First of all, you've got to monitor and develop controls to make sure that the software, the extensions, the add-ons, a lot of these packages, there are 1 million apps that are built, and most of them are free, and most of the free ones are loaded with malware, loaded with viruses, loaded with bots. I mean, just, take a look. And unfortunately, a lot of those are zero-day kinds of bots that aren't going to be picked up and aren't going to be detected by your normal antivirus. So you need to understand that that is a huge risk. You need to understand how you're going to address that, how you're going to monitor that threat. Next, you need to understand if you're going to leverage existing data sources, you need to refine it and restrict it down to a minimum data set and reuse that data set over and over and over again. If you're successful in bringing that together, you will be able to then use identity management logs, proxy logs, feeds from other providers such as Salesforce, those kinds of things to identify what's happening with that data, because it's your job as IT to identify the use of that data and what threat it might be at. Next is the clear, easy-to-use tools. The example on the right on the screen is exactly what you're talking about. The image behind is a dump, and then unless you've got a serious problem of self-abuse, nobody likes to set and page through logs or hex dumps or all those kinds of things. It's got to be usable. So it's very important to utilize a tool, and I do this with a big plug here, the Fair Warning and Salesforce, that provides me a report that's easy to read and tells me what I need to do. Granted, I could get it from the other report, but it's not productive. It's not a good use of my time, and it's not easily understood by the other people that are out there. The people in the business who have selected this tool that they want to use won't understand anything about a dump kind of report. You've got to provide feedback to them in a language they understand. And then you leverage the experience of industry leaders. There are a lot of people out there with pre-built reports, pre-built intelligence, pre-built monitoring of databases, a lot of those kinds of things. And you bring those together, and you don't develop everything from the ground up because you're in a race. Now, we're taking way back to the beginning. The thing that started this whole thing was IT's inability to respond. So you're now in the loop. If you try to say it's going to take a year to develop controls to come around and do it, you just shot yourself in the foot. Okay, so you have to now keep pace. You're in the race, right? You're building respect, and you're building a relationship with those business units. You've got to maintain that. When I saw this, it really hit me. I do a lot with Gartner, and it's that the tidal wave is coming, right? We've either got to learn to swim, or we've got to buying a bigger boat just isn't going to make it. We have to learn how we're going to do. So today, about 80%, 80 to 90% of technology budget is in CIO's control. That's the way it is. It's not really distributed. Gartner is projecting that by 2020, that will just about reverse. 80% will be in the hands of the business, and 20% will be in the direct control of the CIO. So the message here is we need to position for success. We need to develop the tools that allow us to operate at the speed of business, that allow us to operate and satisfy the demand for the businesses in a manner where we've negotiated appropriate service levels. We have to change. They have to change. We've got to meet in the middle here somewhere, or there's going to be major gaps and problems for the company going forward. Kurt?
Yeah, I always learn quite a bit, Gene, no matter how long I've known you, and just learned quite a bit today. Thank you.
Sure.
And then I have one or two slides. You can go ahead. And then we're going to get to the questions. And Gene gave a broad perspective on how to think of shadow IT and security governance strategies with a lot of good macro advice. At the detailed level, what we've brought to market is what we call application security intelligence at Fair Warning. And it's the idea that without some of these tools and logs that Gene described, you really have no visibility whatsoever into access of your applications and, in turn, some of the most very valuable data in your entire business. And up until 2015, when Salesforce introduced event monitoring, it wasn't even possible. Now, we've worked with Salesforce to bring Fair Warning for Salesforce to market with the vision of being very easy to use for a business user. So on the left-hand side is an example for the first time you can get visibility into Salesforce by simply putting a person's name, a date range. It returns back everything that they've touched, exported, or otherwise accessed, and we use that at Fair Warning for our own offboarding processes. That's always a question all business owners have when a salesperson is departing or some other person. Did they export the customer list? Did they export other people's pipeline, leads, key partnerships? In the middle, you'll see the slide with the peaks and valleys, and the cell phone's covering up one of the big peaks on the right. But if an employee, Salesforce user, even a partner has unusual access patterns, we generate alerts that can be received through Salesforce One on a cell phone where the user can be immediately disabled. And there's several other product feature capabilities that we're not going to cover today. But that gives you the main concepts. For the first time, visibility and insights in a simple, easy-to-read manner for business-minded people. Go ahead. What's kind of exciting is that these are all genuine testimonials. When you go out to the App Exchange, you'll see that the customers that are onboarding with us, they appear to share the same vision, that they want simple, easy-to-use tools. They don't want cloud security to be a science project. They want it to be something that installs rapidly, is affordable, and does not take a lot of time to operate, and then is easy to use. And I think we're hitting the mark on that based on the surveys. That is probably my last slide. Tommy, do you have one more?
Yeah.
One more. Go ahead.
It's the conclusion.
It's the conclusion. That's my last slide, but not Gene's. Gene has one more. Gene, can you bring it home from here?
Sure. So we've talked about shadow IT, whatever we want to call it. It's important to realize that in any business, shadow IT has value when managed properly. There are a lot of things that don't require a massive IT project. There's a lot of things that don't require a lot of overhead. There are a lot of instances where the ability to respond quickly to a customer need or demand is worth its weight in gold to the company. So when it's done properly, it has the ability to improve the experience of those internal customers, to make the internal customers understand that IT is a partner. It increases that productivity and flexibility across the organization. Is not just, you go back to the days of distributed computing versus a big iron mainframe. I'm sure I dated myself disastrously here, but there was a lot of questions about then about centralized computing versus distributed. This is the next iteration in that. It also empowers users to act as some decision makers within the business departments that are close to the issues, that are close to the customers. When they operate within the bounds of the strategies and the policies and everything, it provides some firsthand insight from IT to IT, and it takes a lot of the burden off IT when those kinds of policies are followed. So in summary, it's in red on the bottom. Our job is to make technology a business enabler, not an obstacle. Our job isn't to foster IT for IT's sake. We have to be a technology leader. When we do that, when we apply technology for the best use of the business, we all win.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Gene. I really think that's really a fantastic summary. We do have a few questions here. I will encourage you again, if you have any additional questions, you can go ahead and use that Q&A module on the right-hand side to submit those. We'll take a look at the ones we have right now.
And Gene, since the spend, so many of the applications in the spend is moving over to within the business unit control, whether you want to call it business unit or business owner, for the CISO, or for the person in charge of overall security, it begins to take some of the control out of your hands, or at least in some cases your visibility. And I know you came across loud and clear, you got to bridge that gap. But how do you come to, as a security person, how do you come to view the business owners? What's your expectation of them? Can they really be your partner, or do you view them that way? How do you view that?
Well, you have to be open and approachable. Being a security, the old security curmudgeon kind of troll who lives in his office has got to die. Right? Security has to be inclusive. You have to meet with the people, you have to find their needs, and you have to find a way to integrate their needs into your security solutions. Now that means that we can't just do what we've done before. We can't just have antivirus and expect it to work, right? If they're going to be going more to the cloud, we talked about tools that discover, looking at proxy logs, monitoring botnet command and control servers, a lot of those new aggressive things, as well as pulling in intelligence from sources like fair warning, from the government, or from a lot of other services, so to stay out ahead of this. So if they come to you and they say, I want to use Gene's cloud service for this new app, I'll be able to look out there and I'll be able to provide them input into what kind of security issues other people have had. Get involved early. If you add value, they'll come and get you involved early. That's the key.
So it sounds like you already have established a working relationship with your business unit heads. My suspicion is that for many, the business owners are not yet sensitive to security issues and are still operating maybe rogue. I don't know what the right answer is, but at least independently. Any advice to the people listening in on how to, if they're a business owner, on how to think of security and their responsibilities and how to work, almost the inverse of what you just shared?
So, well, I'll start by, if you're a security person, you have to change your demeanor. You have to change your message. You can't go out, sit down across someone and say, what the heck are you doing, right? You need to go out before any of this starts. You need to have a face-to-face with the business unit leader and say, what are your business needs? What are the kinds of things you want to do? How can I help? And from that, you will develop then through a rapport with that person. You'll say, well, I know this is what you're asking, but here are the regulatory concerns, right? These are things that we're required to do from a healthcare perspective, from a finance perspective. So when you've educated that person, because the business unit leader doesn't want to run roughshod and get himself into audit trouble or regulatory trouble. But today, no one is taking the time usually to come in and give him good advice, good practical advice. Yes. Come in, talk about the 3 or 4 things that you're concerned with today. Don't drop 200 pages of PCI documentation on his desk and tell him to read.
Yes.
Right? Be a partner, be a consultant, and negotiate a path toward complete security or security that matches the need of the business.
Yes, and I know we're at 2:30, but most of the people have stayed with us, so I have 1 or 2 more questions.
Sure.
Another tricky area, and you mentioned accountability, establish accountability, but sometimes in a big company, that can be a fleeting concept. Do you have any advice on how to establish accountability from your point of view on where that has to go?
Well, start with the business unit. Start with the person that the bill is going to, right? That somebody used a credit card or someone is signing an invoice that gets in. Find out, work with your partners in finance. Find out who that is. Have a talk with that person about accepting risk for the environment. And it's going to go something like, well, man, I didn't know other people were using this tool for all this stuff. And then you'll find out as you go down, it'll come together. That puzzle will come together, and you're going to find out the people in different areas. You get those people on the hook for what they're doing, and then start talking about merging.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, 1 more. And that would be, and this is, I'm going to shift gears on you, and it's way more, I think it's more technical. We had the data set when you talked about monitoring and logging, you said something to the effect of establish a standard data set and then use it everywhere, or establish.
Yes.
What did you mean by that?
Okay. People will tend to replicate data across the organization. So you will.
In that case, you mean not the audit data, but the literally cardholder information, right, or financial information, so that gets propagated throughout the business? Propagated
throughout the business, whether it's structured or unstructured, spreadsheets, whatever, right? So I mean, look at just simply budget reports. Everyone will have their own budget report. Everyone will have their own twist on it. And when it comes to the day of trying to pull it all together, you're lost, right? What is the truth? Once you define the source of truth for a data set and tell people, give them the advantages of using that data set, it'll be backed up, it'll be replicated to our offsite area, a lot of things.
Yes,
all right?
Got it. Thank you.
That's great, Gene. Thank you so much for sharing all that. It's sad to say, but this is going to be all the time that we have today. If you do have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us directly at solutions@fairwarning.com. You can visit us for more information on our website at www.fairwarning.com/cloud-security. And of course, Fair Warning for Salesforce is available on the App Exchange, so if you want to take a look at any of those other reviews or get some more information, it's a great resource as well. Please look for follow-up emails in the next 24 hours. That will include the link to this replay as well as the materials presented. And thank you so much again for attending. Have a wonderful afternoon.